Welcome to the ninth episode of Drams and Dragons, the podcast about fantasy, whiskey, and the barely coherent ramblings of two middle-aged white nerds. My name is Gus Berger, and with me is my co-host and fellow middle-aged man, Dustin Van Horn. How you doing tonight, man?
Oh boy, I'm doing well, Gus.
All right. I
Lightly
can
reeling from your wonderful intro.
I can re-record that and cut it
Fix it in
out and do
post.
all that. Or not.
I'm an advocate for leaving everything in the show.
Okay.
You know, that's my editing philosophy, would be
Yeah.
the not to edit.
Yeah, I'm
But
the like let's cut out all the tangents and
oh yeah,
tighten it up, make it smooth, make it snappy.
that's good. We get a good mix for the people. But yeah, no, I'm excited for today. I'm excited for the book. I'm excited that I can finally tell you and talk to you about stuff that happened in the book because now you finished.
Now I know.
Yeah, now you
Now I know
know.
everything.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
everything.
There's
Yeah,
there's a lot to know. And I gotta
yes.
say, as I was reading through, there was only one moment for me that was like an oh shit moment where
Oh,
I my mind was blown. There was one moment. We're gonna talk about that later.
oh, can't
There
wait.
was one. There was one. I basically was like everything else fit into place and it kind of made sense. And I was like, there were some things where I was like, oh, that's how they did it, or oh, that's what happened. Okay, that makes sense now, right? There were some things like that, but there was one thing that blew my mind. We'll get into it. Um, Before we talk about the book, I am gonna do a little tasting, little whiskey tasting, because this is still Drams and Dragons. Not we. I mean, we could change the name to Tea and Dragons or Dragons and Dragons or I don't know.
I think we should normalize varying your drams and having different drinks depending on how you're doing that night,
Hey,
especially as
yeah,
middle-aged people.
yeah. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, you know.
I wanted to kind of. We finished up. We're finishing up this First Law trilogy tonight. So the third book is The Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. And so I kind of it's been a journey through this book and through these episodes. And so I wanted to do something a little get something a little special. I mean, for me, it's not like super expensive whiskey or something. It's just I got a little birthday bottle. I had my 42nd birthday recently.
Happy
So
birthday, Gus.
I got this birthday bottle. It is the Kilchoman Machir Bay.
Nice pronunciation.
The Scottish pronounce their CHs not always, but often, right? With that like, you
Yeah.
can if you can't pronounce that like that sound, it's okay. Just call it the Kilchoman. That's the closest kind of the C in Scottish. It's not a silent C. It's a C.
I advocate for a real healthy, throaty, like Kilchoman. I think
Yeah,
that's the way.
yeah. It's like Loch Ness Kilchoman. It's yeah.
Yeah.
For some reason, it's pronounced Machir Bay though. That's a CH. I don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's not as far as I could tell. I looked for the pronunciation of that and everything. Everybody that said it would be like Kilchoman, Machir Bay.
Hmm.
So
I've always
I don't
found the
know.
more you drink of it, the more the pronunciation makes sense. You know? Yeah.
So yeah, so I haven't had this one, and I until a couple days ago I had not had this one. I really liked it. So let me pour and do the notes really quick, just to get the stats on this. It is 46% ABV, which is that's that sort of magic number that they have to get to so that they don't need to chill filter. So it's not chill filtered, no color added. The Machir Bay is like 80-90% bourbon casks, and like the rest of it, it's finished in Oloroso sherry butts. Butts are just the name for big casks,
Hmm.
um, large size casks,
Hmm.
which imparts less oakiness, which I appreciate. I'm not like a quarter cask like double oaked kind of guy. But I really appreciate the sherry flavors.
There's a joke in there somewhere, but
Sherry butts.
we're gonna rise above that for,
Yeah, right. Sure, we are.
yeah.
The one other cool thing about this distillery, I'll say as I pour, it's actually a single farm distillery. Their farm is actually on Isla. It's one of these peated whiskey distillers. It's on Isla, and often, these other distilleries bring their barley from the mainland or from the mainland of Scotland, which is, I guess, still an island. So, they bring it from Scotland. These guys don't. These guys use Isla barley. Some other distilleries will have like a fancy version that uses local materials, local ingredients. Their default is local barley, their own grown barley. So that's kind of like one of their things. And it's really nice scotch. So I'm just going to get my nose in. I get the peat. It's fairly heavily peated. It's actually peated to the level that like Ardbeg is. Like, and I know that the parts per million like measurements that they do aren't perfect, but it's a pretty heavily peated whiskey. You can smell it immediately on the nose. It's not super smoky, but it's got that. It's different. It's maybe more like Lagavulin rather than Lafroig or Ardbeg.
Okay,
that's how I would describe it. It's a little citrusy. It's got some nice citrus in the smell. It's almost got like a metallic, like a tang to it. Not in a bad way.
did you get that iodine kind of thing? Like you
No,
find with
right. No, that it does. It lacks the iodine that like Lafroig has. Oh, Lafroig has that iodine. Port Charlotte has it. It's not as heavily smoky as like an Ardbeg. Like when you first smell an Ardbeg, it smells like you're smelling almost like wood smoke. It's so
right.
strong, right? This is more like, it's hard to describe, but it's got smoke, but not like Ardbeg. It's more like, of all of the peated whiskeys I've had, the one that it's most closely similar to is Lagavulin, I think.
Okay.
It's kind of sweet. It's very nice nose. A little citrusy, a little peaty, a little vanilla.
Nice. Sounds complex. A lot going on there.
Yeah. And just, it's got a very pale color to it because, like I said, there's no color added. And it's a fairly young scotch. There's no age statement on a lot of the Kilchoman bottles. I don't think there's an age statement on any of their bottles, actually, that I recall, because it's a fairly new distillery. It's like when it was founded, it was like the first new distillery in like 100 years or something like that.
Oh, right
on Isla. First new distillery on Isla in like 100 years. And so a lot of there's very relatively new distillery. There's not a lot of time there for them to like, build up this stock of like 10-year, 15-year whiskeys, right? They've got to get it out the door and sell it.
Right.
Keep the doors open, right?
And there's some wonderful whiskeys that aren't, you don't have to have an aged whiskeys to have a good dram.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of places put that age statement on there as almost like a marketing thing or like a prestige thing. There's some amazing whiskeys out there with no age statement. It's between what it means is it's between 3 and 8 years old, because it has to be 3 years old to be a Scotch whiskey, right?
So they have to meet the requirements.
They have to meet the requirement of being 3 years in barrel. And then if it was 8 years or older, you could just assume they would put the number on the bottle. So it's going to be somewhere in that range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say, if you're looking for whiskeys out there and there is the allure, you say, oh, it's a 25 year and it always costs more. And we have this connection between like how much you spend on a whiskey equals how much you will enjoy it. And I've actually found it to be the inverse of that. All the 25 years I have like really hyper specific palates. And if you're not into it, you're probably not going to like it because it's distilled down. It's literally more distilled.
It's evaporated, so it's more condensed, right? Like
yeah.
And sometimes those things get really smooth and some of the harsh edges get taken off, which I think is like why people really like some of those things. And if it's like in sherry casks, then it's going to get more sweet and it's going to pull out more. So it's complicated, but yeah, definitely older doesn't necessarily mean better. I think it's an important note to make. And I really like this. It's quite peaty. It's there's a strange word that I'm going to use.
Oh, I can't wait.
That this peat brings to the table because it's a different peat than the other ones. It tastes to me sparkly. I don't know how else to describe it, but sparkly. And I mean that in like a carbonation way. I mean it very like
effervescent kind of like,
effervescent would be a good way of putting it. It's got a sparkly tingle on my palate.
Okay.
And it comes from the peat.
Oh,
It's sort of one of those like you're like, yeah, I don't know, but if you've had it, and it really has like this tingle, like this sparkly tingle on the palate, almost like pop rocks or something. Like it's you know in just in terms of the feel, not the taste, obviously.
yeah. No.
uh,
Say, did you buy moonshine again? That sounds like a moonshine.
I get a lot of those bourbon flavors, right? A lot of those like almost slight honey, not the sweetness of honey, but like that flavor that honey has, that
Yeah.
like sort of a honey back end, vanilla, caramel. I get barely any of the Oloroso casks.
Mm-hmm.
I get barely any of that. I think it's spent so little. There's a slight like raisininess to it or citrusiness to it that I get, like these kind of like fruity elements playing around like in the back, kind of, but they're not really forward. Uh, I will say that this has a really nice long finish, very warm finish. You get a lot of heat, but in a very comforting way. It's not like a sputtering horrible like sometimes it gets. But this is a very nice warming feel, like from the back of my throat, like back of my tongue, back of my throat, all the way down into my stomach. In a very nice sort of, it's a very comfortable kind of feeling with this drink. It's got those legs in the glass. I don't know. You probably can't see them
Oh
on the
yeah, you can
camera
kind of
here.
see.
Oh, you can kind of see
Can you give
them.
it a little swirl
Yeah, let me
there?
give it
Yeah.
another little swirl, and you can maybe see them. Maybe, yeah,
Yeah,
right
yeah, I
there.
could see a
Maybe,
little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, they've got nice. It's got nice legs. It's got that that sort of thickness, that viscosity to it. That's really nice. And so all those nice flavors just kind of linger on the back of the palate. It's really nice. I'm a really big fan of this, and you see this recommended on a lot of places by like whiskey nerds, and they're recommending it for a reason. It's really good. It was relatively affordable. It's not like some stupidly, it's not super, it's not like bottom shelf or something, but it's not like top shelf either, right? It's hardly, or it's not in the special case or anything, I mean? Like it's just a solid scotch.
What would you say the price
Um,
range is on that?
I got it for like $55 pre-tax.
Nice.
I've seen it for like $70, but
Mhm.
that's a good price for it. $55 is like a solid price, right? That's a good price for it. That's where I got it. I've seen it. Actually, I have seen this for like $80. There's a kind of fancy liquor store in Paulsbo.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Have you been there? I know
Oh
you
yeah.
guys when you lived here. Yeah, 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 yeah. You've been there. So, their prices are like, I don't know, sometimes $15-$20 higher than like
They're stupid high. Yeah.
Total Wine or whatever, right? Now they have some things that Total Wine won't have, and if they're the only place that has it, that's where you got to go. But like
Yeah.
for something that you can get most places, you just go to Total Wine. You're going to get a better price usually. So yeah, this is not an ad for Total Wine. I just I don't like to spend 20 extra dollars on my bottle of whiskey.
Yeah. So that's a good
uh,
one. So like $50 to $80, depending on how hoity-toity your
Yeah, it
liquor
depends
shop is.
on exactly.
Yeah.
Depends on your specific store, depends on their pricing, depends where you live. I think that I actually got this on sale, believe it or not.
What?
Yeah, they hardly ever go on sale. Nothing goes on sale.
Yeah, you never see
And
whiskeys on sale.
yeah, they last forever as long as they haven't been opened, right?
Yeah.
So you hardly ever see it.
Can you
But
hold
yeah,
up
it
the
was on
bottle one more
sale. It
time?
was like, you want to see the
Also?
bottle?
Yeah, I'd love to see the
Yeah.
bottle. We have any? Ah. And how do you
Yeah.
pronounce the Machir Bay? Machir?
Yeah. Yeah. Machir.
Okay. And yeah, I'm looking on Total Wine. Not Total Wine. You can see you got it in my head. It's all that advertising, Gus. Whiskey Exchange has it at 46 fit. Wow, that's euros. Hang on, let me go
Yeah,
into
well, it's gonna
real.
be more like euros or
Let's go. Let's pick the real money here.
instead of monopoly money. uh,
Oh, yeah, it's right under. It's 49.99 if you get it from Whiskey Exchange. And
yeah, so it's like right at that $50 mark. I got it like 55. It's a great price. This is a legit good whiskey.
yeah,
And I'm actually, now that I've had this, which was the one I wanted to try, I kind of want to try some of their other stuff. They have a Soneg, which is like take the proportion of barrel and flip it. So it's got like 10% bourbon casks and like 80-90% Oloroso sherry casks. So I kind of want to try that because I'm actually a big fan of sherried, peated and sherried whiskey. I think it's a nice combination. I've had a couple like that. I really like them. I think it's a great combo. But this is really good. I think it's a fabulous whiskey for a very reasonable price. I think everybody who loves whiskey should go pick up a bottle of this, or a bottle from, Kilchoman. It's good whiskey, good price.
Yeah, good value. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great value. I mean, phenomenal value.
What
This
people
is,
come for.
yeah, it's great value. I mean, above all.
And I really like too. I love that they committed to their whiskey and the coloring of it, and they didn't feel like they had to add the coloring to it. I think that was nice. I did a little side research on the additive they do. It's called E150D Caramel 4.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if I'd recommend looking into it. It's one of those internet rabbit holes where half the people say it's harmless and the other half people say, yes, if you drink a gallon of it, it's carcinogenic and you'll get cancer.
Oh, God.
And everything in between. So
already drinking alcohol. That's pretty carcinogenic.
Yeah, it's one of those things. But no, I think, that's pretty cool.
So for me, that's a recommend. That's a recommend.
Right on, man. I'm excited to try that one day. I have a birthday also coming up, and I am 99% sure that I'm receiving a bottle. So I'm excited to share what that will be.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Yeah. Birthdays, good whiskey times for birthdays.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've had a little bit of a whiskey tasting, let's get into the book.
Right.
So, like I said, we are discussing, recapping, reviewing, whatever you want to call it. Last Argument of Kings by Joe Abercrombie. Third book in the First Law trilogy. Wrapping it all up. The end of the trilogy. Ooh.
Yeah, where to start,
Man, there's a lot to say.
Yeah. Maybe we could start by catching people up a little bit.
Well, let me just say,
unless you gotta,
it felt like two books mashed together.
Oh.
There's so much that happens in this book. Like, for all of the slowness and the sort of wheel spinning and no satisfying endings that the first two books in this series have, because there are very few like satisfying, like punchy moments at the end of the first two books. This book, the third book, is nothing but punches. Like, literally, it's just like moment after moment after moment, again and again and again. He just skips everything in between in this book and just goes to every battle and every fight and every like cavalry charge and every like, wizard battle, and like all of the stuff that's in this book, like, is big. He just cut everything else out. The other two books were like, most of the stuff that you got was like, it was the everything else. It was the in-between stuff. And this book, he flips it and everything is big. Everything is epic. It's the best book in the series, as far as I'm concerned.
I'd agree with that.
And, you have to read the first two to read this way. You don't skip to the third one. You have to read the first two. You have to understand it for this one to be epic like it is. But this one makes it all worth it, and then some. This book makes the whole thing one of the best fantasy series in recent years for me, because before this book, I was like, yeah, it's good. Yeah, sure, it's good. It's got some problems. This book, I'm like,
you get it.
It clicked. It all clicked with this book.
Yeah, I always find it's hard to describe to people that, because it's an experience of reading it. I'm so glad you read it, and that's why I think we led with that. Like, I'm so glad you read it, because it's hard to describe sometimes, because it's remember we kind of described it like a play. This is the big act 3 where like everything comes to fruition. I felt a little different reading it this time because, obviously I love it and I've
Mm.
been a big fan for years. But, it's like we talked about again in the beginning. It hits you different depending on when you listen to it.
Yeah.
And I was rather saddened by the book this time. Like I still think it was well written, and it's one of my favorite series, and I think it's incredible. But like, think how I would describe it. It's almost like he spent this slow time kind of building up like a big sand castle, right? And this book is like it's like when the kid is just like, yeah, kind of breaks down the sandcastle. I don't know if you've ever had your kid do that, where they build up something and then
Oh yeah.
look you
All the
right in the
time.
eye as they destroy it in front
Just
of you. Yeah.
yeah.
But it was done, yeah, you're right, in such an epic, awesome way. Yeah, we have wizard fights, we got eaters doing their things, we've got battles with Northmen, and get to see the Bloody Nine come out a couple times,
Hmm.
which is
And
always fun.
in some tragic ways, it's not
Yeah.
like the Bloody Nine. Like
Yeah, he kills
I
that kid,
really
and you're like,
he kills a child. Uh, he sort of goes berserk, right? I mean, like it's a berserker state. Like he's not. It's like a whole other person, right?
yeah.
It's sort of like he's got this whole other personality inside of him that comes out, right? This is, um, Logan Nine Fingers, one of the main characters of the series. He's basically a berserker, and when he's in his berserker rage, he's kills indiscriminately. Everybody, I mean, describe them in the book. He basically describes it as like everyone is either like dead or soon to be dead. That's how he views everyone around him when he's in this state.
And that's his purpose, to make people
Yeah.
dead.
His
Yeah.
purpose is to kill. And he views everybody basically as an enemy.
Yeah.
And so it happens a couple times. I mean, he kills friends, he kills allies, he kills major characters. He
Yeah.
also kills enemies.
Yeah.
As evil and horrible as the Bloody Nine is, sometimes it's also a useful tool. He ends to some extent some of the biggest threats on the board.
Yep. If we're talking about satisfying buildups, you get tastes of the Bloody Nine. There's that scene where the Bloody Nine messes up all of the practicals,
Yeah,
and he
in book two.
he
Yeah.
smashes the Northman's face in, peck, peck, peck. It's always sticks out of my head.
Yeah.
But in this book, you finally see, and this is why Logan's one of my favorite characters. I thought the buildup was so cool. It's like a Quentin Tarantino-esque thing where he's really good at showing why his characters are badasses. And this whole time we've heard like the Bloody Nine, the North, this, that, everyone's scared of him. Women would tell their children horror, like bedtime stories about the Bloody Nine. He's gonna come get you. And then you finally get to see why in this book. He is like the ultimate wild card. He's an amazing tool to have on your side until he gets hit or hurt, and then he could kill everybody around him.
It's kind of like
Um,
the Hulk, right?
yeah,
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde,
yeah, that's
you
that's a
know,
good one because he's
where
not
he's got
himself.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know he literally is it. I mean, it's like the Hulk. I mean, it literally is that kind of character, except he's like this berserk Northman.
yeah,
Yeah, he's a really interesting character because, of course, most of what you see when you're getting a chapter from his perspective, most of what you see is the sort of normal human, reasonable Logan, right? And then the Bloody Nine comes out, and you get bits and pieces because he's not really in control, and he's not really. But he has some insane moments when he finally, they finally push Bethod's army back to Carleon. They finally do all like there's this big epic battle scene. And this is what I mean by it felt like two books because there's this whole sequence, right? With Colonel West, who becomes the general of the whole army. I mean, it's like this whole first act, and the book is split into two acts. And I almost felt like he was like, well, I'm writing a trilogy, so I got to make it one book. But really, it felt like it was two books, and it felt like it could have been expanded.
yeah,
Each act could have been its own book, right? Because in the first act, they're like, Jezzel becomes king. the war in the North basically is ended in the first act. Like there's a lot that happens in the first act of this book. You could have made it into a whole book. There are enough action sequences. There are enough. I mean, there's the siege at the fort, the up in the hills, and then there's like West comes in and smashes the enemy from behind, and like there. I mean, and like there's so many sequences in the first act. You could have made it could have been it's a standalone book. It would have been a great book in its own right, but it's then got the second act.
Yeah. Just the Gurkis invasion.
Which,
Yeah.
yeah, which is the exactly, which is the Gurkish lay siege to Adua, the main city of the sort of the main sort of it's almost sort of like a British empire, right?
Mhm.
Although I kind of view the North and the Aduans as like two versions of the British Empire or two versions of England, where one of them is
Yeah.
like the Union, the redcoats, the line infantry. I mean, they don't have guns or they have crossbows or whatever, right? Like it's like
All
this
about
like
honor and,
yes, it's about honor
propriety.
and it's very like modern British, not modern, but like Victorian,
Yeah.
Napoleonic era Britain.
Yeah.
And then the North, I mean, you could say it's kind of like Scotland, but it has this feel of like Anglo-Saxon England,
Mhm.
right? It's almost like these two Englands, these two versions of England that are neighbors and enemies and sometimes friends. And um,
And
but yeah,
unlike,
yeah, go
unlike
ahead.
Mr. Cook, who we did last week, Joe Abercrombie is British for sure. So
Well,
probably
our
pulls from
listeners will
that.
be like, last week wasn't
Oh,
last week this other episode.
that's right. They're not exactly sequential.
Yeah, we recorded them slightly. We recorded them and released them slightly out of order. So the last episode we released was actually the one about sort of our fantasy journey. But last week for
Okay.
us, in terms of real time, last week was with
Glenn
the
Cook. Yeah.
Glenn Cook episode. So
Yeah.
our recording and editing and releasing schedule has been a little off chronologically. You gotta listen to it in the chronological order, Dustin.
That's why I like your new intro. I think that really suits the vibe,
Well, that was the last episode, was like the ramblings, the incoherent, barely coherent ramblings, right?
I think they're plenty coherent.
Yeah, most of the time, I
Most of the
guess.
time.
Barely. Oh man.
That's
All right.
yeah,
Yeah, the sorry, go ahead. You had a point.
I keep going meta because I keep going how I felt about the book. The second half for me felt um I don't know how to put this. I think Joe Abercrombie, one of his strengths is he does everything for a good reason, even when it's not something that we would normally see in a book. That's why I said, again, going back, he takes tropes and he likes to kind of flip them. And what I mean by that is,
Yeah.
like the Baez journey, for example, was just this huge nothing burger where they do this great journey and then there's nothing at the end.
Yeah.
And then,
Which I just have to point out.
yeah,
I was dissatisfied with that. And in particular, I was dissatisfied at the end of the last book, not just because it was a nothing burger. That inherently didn't necessarily dissatisfy me, but his reaction dissatisfied me. I want to say now, having read this book, that was actually perceptive reading and great writing,
hmm
because he did just drop it.
yep.
But he just dropped it not because that was out of character for him. I mean, it kind of was, but he just dropped it because guess what? Surprise, motherfuckers. He already had the seed and the journey was about a whole bunch of other stuff.
And the whole it's like you're getting tricked. And I liked it. And I think that was his whole purpose. He wanted you to be like, oh, that's not how it's supposed to go. They're supposed to, to go through the tropes, learn lessons and have growth and things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was the other big trick of this book. Yeah, again, he took that trope of just satisfying the reader,
Yeah.
um, and turned that on his head. So I felt that again in the second act when Logan decides, hey, we're gonna go down and help the Adjuans.
Yeah.
I just had this feeling of dread, like, oh God, Logan. Um, and and even that, one of the themes in this book is that people don't really change all that much,
Hmm.
which is mildly depressing to me. And I actually philosophically don't feel that way. But in this book, these people don't change. And Logan, he's been thrust into this leadership position again. And here he goes down the same old path. He starts becoming the Bloody Nine again. And he
Hmm.
puts it on like a cloak. And he's not really listening to his guys. And he's like, we're gonna go. It's what we're doing. I hated it and I loved it because it was such a sense of dread and foreboding and like tragedy that was about to happen. And I was wondering, yeah, how did it hit you? Like the second
Well,
act
yeah,
and
it is a
moving.
tragedy. I mean, and you use the word tragedy, I think, very correctly there. I think people often misuse the word tragedy. People often refer to tragedy as just being any old bad thing, but it's not. A tragedy is very specific. It has parts. A tragedy in the Greek play sense, right? It has pieces where there's it's avoidable, but kind of unavoidable. It's kind of inevitable.
Yeah,
And things have to fall into place. And you know, if this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and then the bad thing happens. And a good example of this would be the sort of the Iliad that is a tragedy, right? The story of Achilles, where you have this sort of set of events that are chained up. And if the first thing happens, then this whole other set of things happen. And it's going to end more poorly. uh, Oedipus, great play, famous Greek tragedy, right? And it's sort of
yeah,
like a tragedy is sort of defined by like, your doom, you meet your doom on the road you take to avoid it kind of thing, right?
yeah.
It's prophesied. Like tragedy is prophesied. It's not just any old bad thing that happens. A tornado that rips through a town and kills a bunch of people isn't a tragedy. It's horrible, but it's not a tragedy. And this is a tragedy. This is a Greek style, Greek play style tragedy.
And yeah, and you see it. And I was kind of wondering, I've been down on. I'm definitely not a Baez fan from the beginning. I've let that be known.
Yeah.
But Baez is basically the puppet master in all this. And
Mhm.
what did you think about Baez's role in all that? Because that all became clear in the third act, in the final act too.
I see Baez as a sort of tragic figure in and of himself. I think he's the bad guy. Like he's the antagonist
Yeah,
ultimately, but he's also kind of a protagonist.
so grim dark.
He's a complicated character. It's sort of he's not good. I think he's decidedly, he's manipulative, he's egotistical, he's cutthroat Machiavellian. He sees everybody else kind of, I think, like ants. They're just things he's messing with to get outcomes that he wants. He doesn't see people as people particularly, but he's also fighting against another, of these wizards who's worse, who's broken. I mean, say the first law trilogy, the name is the first law. The first law refers to um, these rules, these two rules. It's the first of two rules.
Yeah, don't draw
Um,
power from the nether
yeah,
or whatever that is, and then don't eat the flesh of men. Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And basically, they both give you like insane power.
Yeah.
So these two laws, and I wouldn't say like one of them is more important than the other one necessarily. They're both laws that should be obeyed, right? They're both rules that were put in place for a damn reason. One of the sides is breaking one of the laws, the other side is breaking the other law, and they're both justifying their breaking of the law that they've broken because of the use and breaking of the other law by the other side.
Mm.
So Bayaz is like, well, I have to break the first law because you're breaking the second law. And they're like, well, we have to break the second law because you're breaking the first law. And I don't know which side is like worse. I get the sense based on what we've seen that actually Bayaz is probably the better of the two
Mm.
because of what we've seen, like what we read repeatedly anytime that you encountered the other side. And it's not the Gurkish are puppets, just like the Adjuans are puppets of Bayaz. The Gurkish are the puppets of Kalul or whatever his name is.
Mhm.
who's sort of Bayaz's counterpart, even more evil counterpart. He's
Yeah.
I sort of saw Bayaz as sort of this figure that's caught in this unwinnable situation. He's had this sort of stuff happen in the distant past. He's a very lonely person that sort of he's lived so long that I guess I saw him as kind of I sort of pitied him almost in as much as I sort of like despised him as a reader, right? I guess I pitied him as much as anything because he's in this sort of unwinnable situation against a horrible enemy, and he's also in trying to win that war, he's given up everything about himself and everything about what he's supposed to be, and he's sort of lost sort of he's given up himself in trying to win that. uh and he's already kind of been just completely in some ways he's been by going over essentially and breaking the rules, breaking the laws, he's gone over himself. It's sort of a cautionary tale as much as he is both a villain and kind of an awful anti-hero in some sense, right? He's complicated.
It is, and he leaves it kind of ambiguous.
Mhm.
I took a slightly different tack on Baez in that,
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
well, the big interplay between the Eaters and Baez, the Eaters believe that Baez betrayed the Maker.
Yeah.
And basically, the Maker was like this kind of demigod figure that taught these mages everything. And there was like 7 or 8 of them or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Baez has one story, and then Khalul has another story, and it's repeated by his eaters who are going out there to kill Baez. They say, "We're here to take vengeance upon you for what you did to the Maker. You betrayed the Maker." And there's this other scene where Baez basically leaves his friend. I don't know if Baez is capable of having friends, but he leaves one of his brother mages to die in the house of the Maker. And right before he dies, he says, "You know, Baez, I can't remember. I seem to remember seeing you push the daughter of the Maker off the
Mhm.
cliff." And then Baez kind of does like a, well, maybe you're misremembering it. There's this other scene too where I think it's oh, I can't remember her name. The character, she's the Gurkish woman who's
What?
super
Pharaoh?
badass.
Pharaoh?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember she's like tired of his shit and she goes like, "What really happened?" And he's like, "Does it matter what happened?"
Hmm.
And so I got the vibe this time that my prejudice was confirmed, like reaffirmed against
Yeah.
Baez. I think he is the one. I think he betrayed everything. I think he killed the Maker, threw the daughter down for power, and I think Khalul, in trying to defeat Baez, broke the second rule so he could be more powerful. But that's what's so ambiguous about it. Like, and I think that's Joe Abercrombie's bigger game here. He's talking about the powers that be. History is written by the victors.
Hmm.
Once the fighting starts, who knows who started what and who did what? And does it matter if it happened thousands of years ago? It's hard to say. And it's hard to say who's right. There's no one around to prove it or disprove it. Now there's
Yeah.
just people fighting and dying because of it. It's a pretty cynical.
And they die. I mean, and they die in huge numbers over this.
Everybody
I
dies.
mean, there are very few character. I mean,
Yeah.
there are very few major characters who do actually die in this.
Mm.
The city is in ruins. The people of the city are dead by probably tens of thousands.
Yeah.
I mean, the city is in ruins because of this battle, both because of the siege, because of the battle in the city after the siege, and then because of the wizard battle, and especially maybe because of the wizard battle that goes
Yep.
on between Bayaz and the Eaters, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I did not expect that necessarily. I don't know what I expected. There was a lot of lead up to it. What there was insane.
Dude,
And I don't want to give
it's
everything
yeah.
away because some people might want to go read this.
I will say Abercrombie and oh, sorry to interrupt you.
No,
Finish.
I was just gonna say it's unlike other wizard battles in other books that you're gonna see.
Yeah.
It's quite unlike
Hey,
in a lot of ways.
he subverts the trope. Yeah.
It does
Yeah.
again, yeah,
Yeah. That was my, without giving away what happens. I think this is just a theme of his writing. He's not like other writers where he's gonna necessarily tell you what happens and inform you as to everything. That he's going to leave it ambiguous, and that has a purpose. The purpose of this wizard fight, there's just some weird shit going on. and you don't know what it is because it's literally not of our world.
Yeah.
And the way the writing works with that, like it portrays that and it shows that in a way that was very effective. And I was actually appreciating him the other day. I think probably the opposite author that I could think of right now is Brandon Sanderson, who,
I agreed
yeah,
completely.
whom I'm not throwing shade. I love Brandon Sanderson. I love reading his works, but it's about the opposite. Because he gets nerdy about it, and he's like, this is how the magic works, and he, gets all in there, and his storytelling is
Yeah.
done through those specifics about how it works. Abercrombie just takes the opposite thing. He tells a story. I like it because it enlists your imagination to kind of wonder what's going on, and there's mystery.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's like the soft magic versus hard magic, right? Is what you're describing.
yeah, it's a good way
That's
to put
usually
it.
what people, well, that's usually what people talk about when they're talking about the genre, talking about fantasy magic systems. Is there a system? Is there not? Right. Abercrombie is soft magic all the way. Like there may be rules he may have in his head, some very specific, like written out rules, but he never tells you, which I appreciate. I actually like that. I like soft magic. I
Me
think
too.
I know some people are like really into magic systems, like Brandon Sanderson style magic systems, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of authors that do it, and there's some authors that do it pretty well, including Sanderson. Over time, I have come to prefer soft magic significantly. I kind of have started to see hard magic systems as more like alternate physics. It
Mhm.
loses sort of the feel of what magic is, and it becomes more like sci-fi, like some kind of weird sci-fi, alternate physics world.
Well, because if you understand it, is it still magic?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that if it's too rigid, it's not magic anymore. It's just another
Yeah.
physics. So I really, really like what Abercrombie does in not explaining it all to you. It's fairly consistent. I think that if you sat down and wrote everything out and diagrammed everything out, I think you would be able to figure out some of the rules of this world, some of the magical rules of the world, some of them, but not all of them. And there'd be a lot left for you to guess at.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's consistent throughout. Yeah, even like Pharaoh's got some demon blood stuff going on. Logan can speak to spirits.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's so effective. It keeps the magic magical. And yeah, I think I appreciate that also as a reader. There's a place for the physics replacement too, but
Sure, there is, and I appreciate it as it is. I just, to some extent, I just,
yeah.
as I've matured as a reader, I went through a period where I, really kind of was enjoying that. But then as I've gotten older, as I matured as a reader, yeah, I like it less.
Interesting. You know what's genius too? Oh, I said the G word.
What's genius?
I
What's
said
wrong
the
with
G word.
genius?
I don't know. I don't want
Genius.
these authors to get big heads when they listen to our podcast, but
They're only I like they're listening to our podcast.
yeah,
Sure.
it could be. But
Look, that would be great.
I know, yeah, it would.
That would
And
be
then
great.
Joe, if you're listening, I think that's his
This,
superpower though. Because
yeah.
even that does
Joe, if you're listening, you are a
Mhm.
genius with superpowers. You heard it here first.
I can't think of another author that does this as well. So when I think about books, I think there's content and then there's like process. There's us reading the book, and then there's good authors don't just spoon feed it to you. There's like there's a purpose, there's vibes that they can portray by how they write it.
Yeah.
So this book, the overarching plot of this book is that magic is dwindling from the world, right? It's not everywhere. And I think that's the difference. Like in a lot of Sanderson's work, like magic is kind of ubiquitous. And so people do know about magic and the system is well known. In this series, like magic's on its way out. And Baez says that. He says, this my time's over. And the book reflects that. And I
Yeah.
just think it's so cool that he can just put that broad theme out there and then write it. And especially having read the rest of the books, he keeps going with that scene. It goes into kind of an industrial phase. They're like pre-industrial right now. They're starting to develop gunpowder and things like that. So it's getting more into that Napoleonic kind of vibe.
Yeah. Yeah. And I haven't read the rest of the books in this world. I don't know if we'll do those. If we do, it might be a little while. There's a lot of other stuff I think we want to do first and talk about first.
Yeah, there's
At
so
least I
much.
would. Yeah, there's so much out there
Yeah.
that, but
Got
this
finish Carl,
series,
you know, like
yeah. Oh my god. I think what we're gonna do Dungeon Crawler Carl, the next book next week. You think, right? Yeah,
sounds good to me.
yeah, that'll be fun. But yeah, I absolutely recommend this series. I recommend this book. I can't really recommend this book without recommending the whole series, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think if you found or find either of the first two books a little slow at times or a little unsatisfying, get here, push through it, get to the third book. It's phenomenal. I do want to add, there was something that I said I wanted to talk
Oh
about.
yeah.
The last thing I want to talk about
Shocked you.
is the one thing that blew my mind. Spoiler alert. Skip ahead in the video or the audio a few minutes if you don't want to hear this. Uh, but the thing that blew my mind was the identity of Pike.
Oh, yeah.
Like, holy shit.
Forgot about
My
that. Yeah.
like completely blew me away. It made absolute sense. It was like a bow, or it was like a ribbon on the gift of like wrapping up the whole present that is this series. It was like, and it wasn't one of those surprises that you just feel like was unearned.
Hmm.
Like it was earned, I felt.
Hmm.
And it was phenomenal. I mean, I guess at the point where it happens, what, he's Sergeant Pike,
Yeah.
right? The identity of Sergeant Pike, an all-time reveal
Yeah.
because of how it happens, right?
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden he's at Glocta's throat,
Yes.
right, ready to kill him, and Glocta's like, "Who the fuck are you? What is
He's like,
happening?"
and he's
And
like,
he's like,
yes,
"Don't
yes,
you
finally end it, like he
recognize me?"
does.
Yeah, he's like, "Yes, finally end it all." And he's like, "Don't you recognize me?" Like I was
I
like,
know.
holy shit.
And
Because you
for
by
those,
default, this character's been there for a long time, right?
yeah,
It's not like he just showed up 5 minutes ago and like, he's been a part
yes.
of West's storyline, a very significant part of his storyline for like
Uh,
2 books, right?
yes.
So man,
Cool.
that one got me. That was good. That was a
Yeah.
great little twist. And it wasn't and it's not an enormous book shattering twist, but it's like a mind blower for me. It was anyway.
Cool. Yeah. I'm glad that got you. That's one of the twists that I had like forgotten about. And
Mm-hmm.
but I forgot how exciting it was to learn that because I like knew when I was rereading it, I was like, oh yeah, that's the dude.
Yeah.
He's just melting now. But
Yeah.
yeah, there's I agree with you. It's a definite recommend. Surprising the other characters that we learned to love mostly have tragic endings. I feel like Joe he threw Glotka a bone there at the end though. So Glotka, there's this wonderful scene that I really appreciated this time too. Dude hates himself. Whenever he's torturing people, he's got this like dialogue that says like, "Why do I do this? Why do I do what was done to me?" He's obviously just completely traumatized and he's reliving it. And he ends up with Artie West, this beautiful drunk woman
Yeah.
who wants to be needed and she wants to be like treated well and he's got kind of a soft spot for her. And that's the last scene. He's basically the king of Adua by the end.
I mean, he's the power behind the
He's the
throne,
power
right?
behind. Yeah, he's making the decisions. King can't do anything without passing it by him. He's got everything. He's got the woman of his dreams. He's got this thing, and he's like crying at the end. He says, "I don't deserve this." And I thought that was a nice little narrative kind of
Mm-hmm.
way to end it. It's the people that deserve it don't always get what they deserve, and sometimes the opposite's true.
Yeah. Like West. West doesn't get what he deserves. West is
Oh
like he saved the
man,
kingdom.
I
He
forgot
saves
about
the
that.
kingdom.
I was
It
so
was
sad. Yeah,
brutal.
so brutal.
I
Again,
mean, I'll just
wizard
yeah.
stuff killed Wet.
Wizard
Yeah,
stuff killed a lot of people, and again, there's spoilers.
yeah.
There's going to be some spoilers. So one of the side effects of the wizard duel, right, is basically like they unleash kind of, what you say, radiation poisoning,
Yeah,
kind
like
of like
acute
magic,
radi
like acute radiation poisoning.
yeah, where they're like skin sloughing off a couple hours later and they're dead, like kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's like one captain. It's not captain again. He's General West by the end of this. He's the marshal of the
Marshall.
army.
Yeah, yeah.
Marshal West in charge of the armies of Adjua. Yeah, and he dies of it after at the very end of the book, basically. And it's this really sad moment where he and Glokta kind of connect, like right at the end, right before he passes. Yeah, but he's like, it's sort of like this thing, like you said, where like the people that deserve it don't get what they deserve, right? Like Glokta has done so many horrible things. He probably deserves to die. That's what he wants ultimately, right? Whereas, West saved everybody, competent. I mean, he's kind of a jerk sometimes. He has a temper, but he's also like a really good officer, mostly honorable, you know,
Mhm.
treats other characters right for the most part, with a few notable exceptions.
Very notable, but
With a few very notable exceptions. He's generally one of the handful of characters in the thing where you could point to this guy and be like, oh, he's probably sort of the closest thing or one of the closest things to a good guy, and say like West and Dogman, right, are kind of the two guys where you look
they're the
at
good.
them
Yeah.
and they're kind of the good guys.
Yeah, they ground everything and they're good. Yeah.
Yeah, they're generally good people. Some other group like the Three Trees was, and there's some other characters throughout the books that are maybe good guys or decent,
They're mostly
genuinely
dead.
decent. They're and almost all of them are dead by the end.
Yep.
So again,
So yeah,
we recommend it. I think both of us highly recommend it. It's God, what year was this published in? Blade itself was first published in 2006. Last Argument of Kings came out in 2008.
and his latest book, latest book just came out this year. Still going.
Yeah, the series is still ongoing. The overall series is still ongoing. This trilogy is finished, obviously, but the overall series is continuing. In terms of like, I would say that solidly puts it into sort of modern fantasy, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
and it is one of the better trilogies that I've read in modern fantasy. I don't. It's
I'm
not.
glad to hear that, Gus.
I would not say it's my favorite trilogy, but it's up there. It's up there for sure. And I don't ask me to rank them. There's so many. I
Maybe
get.
one day
Maybe
we'll get
someday
brave
we'll
and
do rankings. Yeah, I don't.
sounds like a good show.
Clickbait rankings or clickbait.
We'll have to get our faces ready. What's the best?
Oh God, those like YouTube video faces, like, or people are just like, it's ridiculous looks on their faces.
They say you have to get the algorithm to you already got it, Gus. It'll just be both of us.
Oh God, there'll be a book in the middle, and we'll each have our face on the other side, going.
Uh-huh. It'll be
Oh
some,
God.
it'll be clickbaity too. It'll be like Lord of the Rings, worth it, or overrated. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Is it overrated? So if there's ever like an article or video or anything where where it's like the title is a question,
Uh,
the answer is always no.
Yeah.
Virtually.
Yeah, virtually. Yeah.
It's almost always no. You could just lock it in. Is it overrated? The answer is
What?
going to be no.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Freaking internet
Yeah.
and shitification, man.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I will say, Joe Abercrombie has not enshittified. I think his writing's gotten better and tighter. Now you can read about all the characters' kids making bad decisions, and fighting the man. And I will say, without spoilers, there's a reason Glotka's my favorite. Glotka has an awesome arc.
He does.
It's kind of satisfying.
He has a great arc.
And even the Glotka's featured in the last 3 books also. And I think is going to be the end of that world. And especially having reread the series, like I appreciate his work even more. Like Glotka's a cool character. He continues to be. Oh, anyways.
All right, man.
Yeah. Thanks for reading them. It's exciting.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. It was really fun to talk about. Really fun to read.
Yeah.
And we'll have to figure out what the next series we're gonna do is, because now that we're finished with this one, we're gonna have to add something else in. We're gonna have to get going on that. I don't know. We could text about it later, but there's so many to pick from. Modern classics, classics.
Yeah. I've been reading Moorcock lately.
Yeah.
Melibene.
There's an accent on the last E, so it has to end with A, like Melnibene.
Gotta be that.
It can't be Melnibone or Melnibone. It has to be Melnibene.
Yes.
We can figure all that out later. but
Yeah.
I think it's time for us to sign off, man. Thank you to everybody for listening. It's been a pretty cool series on this First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for coming along with us. We hope you stick around for the next one and the next one after that. And tell your friends. Word of mouth is important. It's how podcast audiences grow, and if you like it, tell people. Tell your fantasy nerd friends. Tell your whiskey nerd friends. Tell anybody. Tell your mom. Tell your dad.
We
Tell your
want all the
grandma.
moms.
Yeah, and
All the
grandma,
Yeah, we want
grandpa.
grandmas.
I don't know. Maybe they like whiskey.
Um, oh yeah, and the last bit, we almost forgot. There's a Dungeon Crawler Carl print edition releasing.
Oh yeah, news.
Yeah, we're gonna do a news
News.
segment.
So
Yeah.
today on the news.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
there's a cool
basically
little
it.
piece of news. Cool little piece of news. Yeah. Dungeon Crawler Carl is getting picked up by the Penguin Random House, like one of their fantasy imprints or something, is doing a print edition of Dungeon Crawler Carl. He's indie, self-published, all that stuff, right?
Hmm.
But he never put out his own print edition, so somebody decided to do that. They released some promo stuff for it recently, last few days. The new cover, you can go check out the new cover. It looks pretty cool.
Got like a pulp. You ever see those old I think Johnny Quest kind of style things? Like it's almost like a shadow pulpy kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So it's got him running. There's a cat behind him, and
Yeah.
it reminds me of Venture Brothers a little bit. If you ever watched
Yeah,
that.
Venture Brothers for sure. I think
Yeah.
that's a good comparison for sure. Yeah, interesting little cover
Yeah.
there.
Look at
So,
that. We got
uh,
news segment.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Look
there
at all
might
the
be
value.
there will probably be more little fantasy news things like that. So, just saying, there
Damn.
might be. If you like it, if you
Yeah.
hate it, tell us. Tell us to fucking cut it out.
Yeah, we got people
Or
now. Yeah.
we do. I am amazed, pleased, even
Delighted. Ah, yes.
yes, delighted. I am
Yeah.
delighted.
We are delighted.
Weird. I'm very pleased, very, very surprised,
Yeah.
shocked, but happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for
Stay gold.
listening. Yeah, stay gold. I like it.
All right. Yeah.
All
Stay
right. Yeah.
gold.
Take care, everybody. And Gus, thanks for the conversation, man. Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Likewise. Have a good night.
You too, man.